Think that old penny in your pocket is worthless? Think again. Today, we're diving into the top 7 most valuable Lincoln wheat pennies and the fascinating history behind them. Let's find out which of these copper treasures could be worth a small fortune. First up, first minted in 1909, the Lincoln Wheat Penny series was designed by Victor David Brenner to honor the 100th birthday of President Abraham Lincoln. These coins feature his portrait on the obverse, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. The reverse design, with 2 wheat stalks surrounding the words 1 cent, gave this coin its popular nickname, the Wheat Penny. Fast forward to 1952, a time when the United States was emerging from the Second World War and the economy was changing rapidly. In that year, the Denver Mint struck over 746 million Lincoln wheat pennies. That's a massive number, which means the 1952 D penny is not considered a rare coin overall. However, collectors still value them, especially coins in uncirculated or mint state condition. But what about a 1952 D wheat penny that's in bad condition? Maybe it's scratched, worn, down, discolored, or missing clear details. You might be surprised to learn that even coins like these can hold some value, though not much in terms of market price. Their value can be symbolic or sentimental, especially for beginner collectors or those building complete date sets. In general, a 1952 D wheat penny in poor condition, what collectors call good or about good condition, might only be worth around 3 to 5 cents. That's just slightly above face value. However, if you have a bunch of wheat pennies, even worn ones, their value can add up over time. Collectors sometimes buy bulk wheat pennies by the pound, and that's where heavily circulated coins like these often end up. It's also worth noting that the 1952 D penny was made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, which gives it a rich, dark tone as it ages. Even in poor condition, that copper content alone gives it a bit of intrinsic value, especially when copper prices go up. Now, let's talk about errors or variations. While rare, if your 1952 D penny has a noticeable minting error, such as a double die, off-center strike, or repunched mint mark, it could still be worth much more, even in worn condition. Some of these error coins have sold for several dollars or more, depending on the type and severity of the error. But finding one like that is rare, and most bad-condition 1952 D pennies are just regular coins that have seen decades of use. So, how do you tell if your coin is just worn out or something special? First, check for any signs of doubling, especially around the date or lettering. Then examine the mint mark, the D just below the date, to see if it looks like it was stamped more than once. Use a magnifying glass or coin loop to get a good look. If you're still unsure, you can always consult a professional coin dealer or send your coin to a grading service like PCGS or NGC for evaluation. But keep in mind, professional grading isn't usually worth it for low-value coins in poor condition. Next up, the 1917 Lincoln Wheat Penny. Specifically, we'll focus on the version that's in faded or heavily circulated condition. While it might not look like much at first glance, this coin has an incredible backstory and still holds value in the world of numismatics. So let's talk about what makes the 1917 Wheat Penny special, how it fits into American history, and what it might be worth today, even when it's far from mint condition. The Lincoln Wheat Penny was first introduced in 1909. Created to celebrate the 100th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, it became the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. With Lincoln's portrait on the front and 2 stylized wheat ears on the back, the coin quickly became a favorite among the American public. Fast forward to 1917. This was a time when the United States had just entered World War I. The economy was changing, the country was mobilizing for war, and coins like the Lincoln Wheat Penny were a small but constant part of everyday life. In that year alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 196 million Lincoln cents, making the 1917 penny fairly common in terms of original mintage. There were also smaller mintages from the Denver and San Francisco mints, marked by the D and S mint marks under the date. If you're holding a 1917 penny that's faded, scratched, or extremely worn, chances are it came from the Philadelphia Mint, as most of those coins didn't carry a mint mark. Over time, circulation and heavy use can cause the fine details, like Lincoln's hair, the Liberty inscription, and even the date, to become faint or hard to read. That kind of wear is common for a coin that's over 100 years old, and it's what collectors call good or about good condition. Now, in terms of value, a heavily worn 1917 wheat penny with no mint mark is generally worth between 20 cents and 50 cents. That might not sound like much, but it's still significantly above its original face value. And if you have the 1917D or 1917S varieties in the same poor condition, those can be worth slightly more, usually between 50 cents and 150, depending on the exact level of wear and current market demand. Remember, these values apply to coins that are heavily circulated. If you had a higher grade example with sharper details, the value could jump significantly. One thing to keep an eye out for, even on faded coins, is the possibility of minting errors. Some 1917 wheat pennies are known for having doubled die obverses, which means the image and text on the front of the coin appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. This type of error can dramatically increase the value of a coin, even if it's in worn condition. A 1917 doubled die penny, even with wear, could be worth $100 or more, depending on how visible the doubling is. That's why it's always worth examining your coin carefully under good lighting or with a magnifying glass. Beyond value, what makes the 1917 wheat penny fascinating is the history it represents. Think about it. This coin was in people's pockets during a world war, during the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, and during a time of major societal change in the United States. It has likely passed through countless hands, survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and decades of use before finally ending up in your collection, your change jar, or your drawer. Even in poor condition, a 1917 wheat penny is a piece of living history. It reminds us of a time when 1 cent could buy you a handful of candy or a ride on a streetcar. While its monetary value may not be high, the historical and sentimental value is something collectors truly appreciate. Next up, let's begin with some historical context. The year was 1944. World War II was raging on, and nearly every industry in the United States was focused on supporting the war effort. The country had already made one major change to coinage. Just a year earlier in 1943, when pennies were made of steel coated with zinc instead of the usual copper. This was done to save copper for ammunition and military equipment. Those 1943 steel cents are now famous in the world of coin collecting. But in 1944, the U.S. Mint returned to using copper to make pennies. However, due to the ongoing war, they didn't use freshly mined copper. Instead, many of the 1944 pennies were made from recycled shell casings collected from the battlefield. These casings were melted down and turned into coin blanks, then struck into pennies. That makes the 1944 penny not just a coin, it's a piece of wartime history. In total, the U.S. Mint produced more than 1.4 billion 1944 Lincoln wheat pennies across its 3 mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. That means 1944 is one of the highest mintage years for wheat pennies. As a result, most 1944 pennies are quite common, even today. You'll often find them in circulated condition, including those that are dirty, scratched, or worn down from decades of use. Now let's talk about value. If you have a 1944 wheat penny that's in dirty and damaged condition, maybe it's discolored, covered in grime, or has heavy wear, it's likely to be valued at just a few cents. On average, a coin like this might be worth around 3 to 5 cents, depending on how bad the damage is. If it's really rough, its value may stay close to face value, especially if there's no visible date or the coin is corroded. If the coin was minted in Philadelphia, it won't have a mint mark. Those are the most common 1944 pennies. If there's a small D under the date, that means it came from the Denver Mint. A small S means it was made in San Francisco. Even in dirty or damaged condition, the Denver and San Francisco mint marks might give the coin a slightly higher value, but generally only a few cents more, unless the coin is in very high grade, which in this case it isn't. However, there is one rare error coin from 1944 that's worth a lot of money. It's called the 1944 steel penny. That's right. Some leftover steel planchets from 1943 accidentally got mixed into the 1944 production and were struck as 1944 steel cents. These coins are extremely rare and valuable, even in worn condition. If your 1944 penny is gray or magnetic, there's a chance it might be one of these rare errors. But keep in mind, these are very rare, and most 1944 pennies are made of copper. Also, some people try to clean old or dirty coins, but it's important to know that cleaning a coin can actually lower its value. Collectors prefer coins in their original state, even if they're dirty or discolored. Cleaning can scratch the surface or strip away the coin's natural patina, and that reduces both historical and collectible value. So, if you have a 1944 penny that's seen better days, it's usually best to leave it the way it is. Even in bad condition, the 1944 wheat penny is still a wonderful find. It's over 75 years old, and it holds a small piece of American history. It reminds us of a time when the nation was united during war, when resources were scarce, and when coins like these were part of daily life for people working hard to support the country. For collectors, even the most worn coins help complete a date and mint mark set. And for anyone interested in history, it's amazing to hold something that's passed through so many hands over such a long period. Next up, the Lincoln wheat penny was first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. Designed by Victor David Brenner, it featured Lincoln's profile on the obverse and 2 wheat stalks on the reverse. It quickly became one of the most iconic coins in American history. In 1955, the Denver Mint produced over 563 million wheat pennies. That's right, 563 million. These coins were struck in large numbers to keep up with the growing economy in the post-World War II era. With such a high mintage, the 1955 D penny is not rare in itself. You can find them quite easily, especially in circulated condition. The D under the date indicates it was minted in Denver. But what makes your coin different is the black shade or dark discoloration. This is not a rare mint error. It's actually the result of environmental damage or chemical reactions over time. A coin can turn black due to exposure to moisture, dirt, air pollution, high humidity, or even being buried underground or stored in poor conditions. The copper surface reacts with oxygen and other elements, forming a dark or black patina. This kind of toning is common on older coins, especially those that weren't stored properly. Now, it's important to understand that a black or dark-toned wheat penny is usually not more valuable than a normal one. In fact, the black color often means the coin is graded as damaged or environmentally altered, which typically lowers its collector value. Even though it looks unique, most collectors prefer coins with original natural luster or even wear over those with discoloration caused by damage. In circulated condition, especially if the coin is dark, scratched, or worn, a 1955 D penny is usually worth around 3 to 5 cents. It's a small increase over face value, mostly because it's an older wheat penny made of 95% copper. Copper itself has intrinsic value, so these coins are often saved for their metal content, especially when copper prices rise. However, that doesn't mean the 1955 D penny has no value at all. It still has a place in collections, especially for those completing a full date and mint mark set of Lincoln wheat pennies, and it holds historical value too. It was minted during the Eisenhower administration, a time when America was in the middle of the Cold War and new technologies, industries, and suburban life were booming across the country. It's also worth noting that 1955 is a famous year in the Lincoln cent series because of the well-known 1955 double die error, though that only occurred at the Philadelphia Mint, not in Denver. That error features a dramatic doubling of the date and lettering and is highly sought after by collectors. Unfortunately, the 1955 D penny was not part of that error batch, so if your coin has a D mint mark, it's not one of those rare double dies. Next up, is this coin rare? Does the black color make it special? What is its true value today? Let's explore all of this in detail as we look into the history and value of the 1956 D black-shaded wheat penny. Let's begin with some background. The Lincoln wheat penny was first minted in 1909 and ran until 1958. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the coin features President Abraham Lincoln on the front and two wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent on the back. It was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person's image and quickly became a piece of American numismatic history. Now let's talk about 1956, the second to last year of the wheat penny's production. In 1956, the Denver Mint produced an enormous number of these coins, over 1.098 billion wheat pennies with the D mint mark. That means this coin is quite common in circulated condition. So, what about your 1956 D penny that appears black or dark in color? That black shade is usually the result of toning or environmental damage. Over time, copper coins like the Lincoln wheat penny can change color due to exposure to moisture, air pollutants, chemicals, or simply being buried or stored improperly. Instead of the typical reddish or brown tone, these coins can turn black, dark gray, or even green depending on the conditions they were exposed to. Let's be clear. This black color is not a mint error. It's not something that happened during production. It's a post-mint condition issue that collectors call environmental damage. While it might look interesting or antique to the untrained eye, this discoloration actually reduces the value of the coin in most cases. So, what's the value of a 1956 D wheat penny in black or damaged condition? In this dark-toned or blackened state, especially if it has scratches, corrosion, or heavy wear, the coin is typically worth between 2 to 5 cents. That's just slightly above its face value, mostly because of its copper content. But if the coin is only darkly toned, without deep corrosion or heavy damage, and it still has visible details, it might sell for around 10 to 15 cents to someone looking for a filler coin for their wheat penny set. On the other hand, if your 1956 D penny is in uncirculated or brilliant condition, its value can jump up. Mint state examples, MS-60 to MS-65, can be worth $1 to $5 or more, especially if the coin shows a clean strike, strong luster, and no spots or discoloration. But again, a black shade usually means the coin has been compromised by age and the elements. That puts it on the lower end of the value spectrum. Now what about errors? While 1956 D pennies don't have any major well-known mint errors like the famous 1955 double die from Philadelphia, there are a few minor varieties and minting issues that collectors look out for, such as repunched mint marks, RPMs, or die cracks. If your dark 1956 D penny happens to have one of these errors, it could still be worth more, even in worn or toned condition. Next up, the 1944 D wheat penny was struck at the Denver Mint and features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner. This design first appeared in 1909 and ran through 1958 with the wheat ears on the reverse. The 1944 penny is particularly interesting because of its historical context. Just 1 year earlier, in 1943, the U.S. Mint produced pennies from zinc-coated steel instead of the usual copper. This was done to save copper for ammunition and other military needs during World War II. But the steel cents had issues. They rusted quickly and were often mistaken for dimes. So in 1944, the Mint switched back to using copper, specifically repurposed shell casings from the war. This alloy was called shell case bronze, and it gave the 1944 pennies a distinctive appearance. The Denver Mint alone struck over 430 million of these pennies, making them one of the most commonly produced coins of that year. If you have a 1944 D penny that's damaged, corroded, worn down, or heavily discolored, you might be wondering if it's still worth anything. The truth is, in most cases, coins in bad condition carry very little numismatic value. A heavily damaged coin may be missing details, such as parts of the date, Lincoln's hair, or the wheat stalks on the reverse. It might also show signs of corrosion, be bent or scratched, or have environmental damage from being underground or exposed to moisture. These flaws significantly reduce the coin's appeal to collectors. Most collectors seek well-preserved examples with sharp details, clean surfaces, and original color. When a coin is too damaged, it's considered a filler, just something to hold the place in a collection until a better example is found. In the case of a 1944 D penny in poor condition, its value usually stays around 1 to 3 cents. Sometimes, it might bring 5 cents if it's in slightly better shape. Coins that have a lot of surface damage or are badly worn don't typically exceed that price range. The only time a damaged coin might still be valuable is if it has a known mint error, such as a double die, off-center strike, or a planchet error. However, such errors on 1944 D pennies are quite rare, and they are even more difficult to verify on a coin that is already in bad shape. In most cases, a damaged 1944 D penny doesn't show any of these rare features and is instead valued only for its metal content and historical interest. Now, many people wonder whether cleaning the coin will make it more attractive or more valuable. The answer is no. Cleaning a coin, especially with chemicals or abrasives, almost always lowers its value. Collectors can easily tell when a coin has been cleaned, and it often removes the natural patina that can protect the coin and even add to its appeal. Even in bad condition, it's better to leave a coin as is than to attempt cleaning it. The damage is already there, and cleaning won't reverse it. It usually just makes it worse. Despite its low value, the 1944 D penny is a fascinating piece of history. Think about where it's been. Minted in the heart of World War II, possibly. From the shell casings of real bullets used in battle and passed through the hands of Americans during a time of global upheaval and national unity. This penny might have helped buy a soda at a corner shop in 1945, been dropped in a church offering plate, or given as a tip in a diner filled with jazz music and optimism. Even when worn or damaged, this coin has character and tells a story of American resilience. Next up, the 1946 wheat penny was struck just after World War II had ended. It was a time of rebuilding and optimism in the United States. Families were reuniting, soldiers were coming home, and industry was shifting from war production to peacetime. The U.S. Mint, which had played a key role during the war by producing wartime coinage such as steel cents in 1943, returned to producing coins using more traditional metals. In 1946, the penny was once again made of a copper alloy known as bronze, which consisted of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. This return to normalcy in coin production reflected the broader return to normal life across the country. The Lincoln wheat penny design, created by Victor David Brenner, remained unchanged in 1946. It featured the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln on the front and 2 wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America on the reverse. The year 1946 saw over 1 billion wheat pennies produced across all 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 991 million, which means the 1946 wheat penny is extremely common today, especially in circulated or worn condition. When it comes to the value of a 1946 wheat penny in worn condition, it's important to understand what worn means. Worn coins are those that have been used in everyday transactions for many years. The high points of the design are typically smoothed out. Lincoln's hair and jawline may be faint, the details of his coat may be nearly gone, and the wheat ears on the back might be flat or barely visible. There may also be discoloration, scratches, or signs of corrosion if the coin was stored in poor conditions or exposed to moisture. Because of the high mintage and the large number of surviving examples, 1946 wheat pennies in worn condition generally have very little collector value. Most dealers would value them at around 1 to 3 cents, maybe 5 cents, if the coin has a little more detail or better color. These coins are often considered fillers, meaning they are used by collectors who want to complete a set but don't yet have a higher grade version of that year. They're common and affordable, which makes them great for beginners, but they rarely attract interest from advanced collectors unless they are in uncirculated or mint state condition. It's natural to wonder whether an old coin like this can become more valuable over time. Unfortunately, the answer is usually no, at least not for coins in poor or worn condition. Because so many 1946 pennies were made and because so many still exist, there isn't much scarcity to drive up the price. However, if the coin has an error, like a double die,